This episode's theme is an unusual one. Wraith, manifestation of the spirit of a still alive person. When we say a ghost, we usually mean a spirit of a dead person, because our spirit is not supposed to detach from our body otherwise. But in some rare cases that it does, it's called a wraith. Actually, it's so rare that I had a hard time to find any information beyond the simple definition of the word. The only place where wraith is known wider is Japan, where it is called ikiryo, literally a living ghost. The concept of wraith or ikiryo in Japan is used for various characters in modern pop cultures like cartoons or computer games, but considering the oldest example is already found in the famous Tale of Kenji, I guess wraith has a firm root in Japanese occult. The biggest difference between the Western wraith and Japanese ikiryo is under what circumstances it can occur. In the Western world, or at least in the English-speaking world, the phenomenon of wraith seems to occur shortly before a person dies, namely when the spirit's tie is already loosened from the body. While in Japan, it can occur if the person's balance between the spirit and the body should undermine for whatever reason, ranging from extreme obsession, jealous, or even love. Now, back in Korea, the concept of wraith seems to be even more obscure. Few information about it in Korean is more or less a direct translation of the Japanese concept. Despite of the very much alive traditional local shamanism, occult in Korea has had a huge influence from Japan for some reason. Nevertheless, I did find a few stories that could be considered as featuring a wraith. In terms of context, it adheres closer to the Western concept that it occurs when a person is about to die. Apart from one story, the writers don't seem to have had the concept of wraith, and to my mind, it adds to the authenticity. Okay, enough of blah blah. Let's read stories now. Here are 4 allegedly true stories about wraith, ghosts of a living person. As always, handpicked, translated, and narrated by host. Anthony. I am not a shaman, but I was born with a particular spiritual sensitivity. In other words, I see spirits and ghosts. It's fine if you don't believe in such a thing. I could only tell from my own experiences, and the following is just one of them. Once on my teenage years, a girl in the neighborhood, a uni student, went on a holiday with her friends. Her parents initially opposed the plan, but what could they do to stop a grown-up girl? She went on her merry way with her friends on a rented minivan. 2 days later, I was on my way back from a corner shop late in the evening. I saw from afar the uni girl, looking visibly despondent. I just thought she was back home early from the holiday. Maybe something didn't go as planned. But whatever. As I walked past her home the following day, I saw it all locked up and empty. It was a small town, more a village where I lived, and people often didn't bother to lock up their gate when they were home. But then I saw the uni girl coming back home late in the evening a few more times. The reason it took me so long to notice something was wrong was because she didn't come across like a ghost. By then I had already plenty of experience of witnessing various ghosts and spirits, but she didn't feel anything like them. But I finally found she wasn't a person either, only on the 5th day. She appeared about the same time of the evening, but now she didn't have legs, just her upper body, and she floated in through the gate of her home. Upon closer inspection, I noticed a faint thread or a cord attached to her behind. I realized it was the wraith of the uni girl. Till then I only heard about it, but it was the first time I saw it myself. The girl must be in a mortal danger or dying, but not yet dead. Her spirit alone didn't realize it and kept coming back home as she normally would have. Following day, she appeared again in the evening. The cord behind her was now even fainter. I called out for her, but she didn't seem to hear me and just disappeared through the gate. Following evening, the girl didn't appear. Instead, I saw her parents. They were crying and lamenting. Their girl had an accident, but they didn't find her body. Others were found, but their girl alone was still missing. But then came a man in black and told them that they must now move on, and took still crying neighbors away. I realized they too passed away, and the man in black was a Grim Reaper. It was only a few days later, when the family's relative came to clear up the house, that I got to hear the full story. The minivan that the uni girl and her friends were riding crushed over the fence and fell off a cliff. All the passengers were found dead, but the uni girl's body was missing. Her distraught parents took it upon themselves to find their daughter, but tragically, they too crushed with a lorry and passed away. Only if they knew their girl was still alive for a few days, only if they knew where to find her in time, then they might all have happily reunited, alive. Sadly, till my family moved out of the town a few years later, the uni girl's body was not found. In 1998, I worked part-time at a paper-producing factory in Sinchon. The area is of course best known for major universities and fashionable street of clothing shops and bars catering students. But separated by just a few alleyways was this small shabby factory too. Right outside the factory was a single railway, and I had to cross it to get work every day. At first I assumed it must be a disused rail route just left to rot, because there was no fence, crossway or control at all, nor did I see any train passing by. But I was wrong. By then infrequently used, but still some cargo trains carrying coal or timber would run on the route. One evening, I and some other colleagues gathered after work and had a drink on the rooftop of the factory. We all got nicely tipsy, and as boys often do when drunk, we came up with a silly idea: to have a running race from one end of the rooftop to the other end. The rooftop was rather long, and it wouldn't have been a big issue to have a 100-meter race. But in the dusk, we forgot there was a close drying line in the middle. The fastest of the colleagues ran into it and got caught by the line at his throat. He was nearly 90 kilograms heavy and was running in his full speed, and the impact was hard enough to lift his feet off the ground. It was torn and bleeding across his throat, and he had to be taken to hospital. It was bad, but thank God I heard it wasn't anything life-threatening. 2 days later, I and some colleagues were going for lunch at a restaurant across the railway. I kind of forgot where I was, so busy chattering and fooling around with my colleagues, when I heard somebody calling my name from behind. It was the voice of Lee, who should be then in the hospital due to the accident 2 days prior. I stopped to turn back, and right that second, I heard a thunderous noise of train passing by right in front of me. I was so busy fooling around that I didn't see it coming. If I had taken just a step further, my face would have been blown off by the full-speed train. I was frozen for a few seconds, even after the train passed, my t-shirt wet with cold sweat. When I finally turned back again, there wasn't a sign of Lee anywhere. I ran to the hospital straight away. I thought Lee must be dead, and his spirit came to save my life, because Lee and I were particularly close among colleagues. When I arrived, Lee was sleeping on his bed. He woke up almost as soon as I arrived. He looked very surprised to find me there, and opened his mouth before I could explain why I was visiting. He just had a dream in his sleep, in which he saw me running towards the railway despite a train approaching in full speed. Lee called out to stop me, but I didn't seem to hear him. Then Lee saw a man in black standing by and called out to him to stop me. The man in black indeed managed to hold me back and saved me from getting hit by the train. But then he now turned to Lee and ran towards him. As he got closer fast, Lee saw his terrifyingly pale face. He got panicked and just clenched his eyes shut before he woke up. Naturally, it shook me too. It was indeed Lee that saved my life. Lee got equally surprised to hear my account from earlier. We were shaken, but happy. Probably we were blood brothers or something in the previous life. A week later, Lee recovered enough to get discharged from the hospital. He was on his way to say hello to me and other work colleagues, and killed by a car accident by the railway. I left the factory after that, and to this day never returned to that part of the town. It's a story my teacher told us during a class as it happened to her friend. I'll call the friend Kim for the sake of the story. As a high school student, Kim attended a private school. On the school ground was something only few knew about, that behind the fenced area of the mountain at the back of the school was the school founder's family tomb. This will play a role in the later part of the story. At the time, Bunshinsaba game was all the rage. If you don't know, Bunshinsaba is a form of necromancy as a play, like a better-known Ouija board. Bunshinsaba is much cruder form of it, performed with just a piece of paper as the board and the pen as the planchette. It's believed to be originated, or at least influenced by Japanese occult, and probably started spreading in the late 80s, and had a heyday in the late 90s. So, after the night study slot finished at 9, Kim and a few mates gathered around and played Bunshinsaba. They chanted a supposed spell of calling, holding a pen over a paper. "Is anybody there?" To their excitement, the pen moved to make an O sign. "Are you dead?" The pen made another circle. They were excited, but remained skeptic. But it became clear that something was there when the pen moved to spell out a full name, a girl's name, Im Young-hee. "How old are you?" 17, was the reply. They carried on asking a few more questions, but it all got too creepy, and wrapped up the session without following the usual closing procedures like burning the paper used and break off the pen. A few days passed. Kim's friend, who was part of Punshinsaba game, was in charge of emptying the class bin that evening. So Kim was waiting for her in the classroom. The moon was full and the lights were all on inside, so it wasn't even dark or eerie at all. Kim saw from the window her friend coming back and playfully shouted, "Hurry up, you lazy! Let's go home!" Then Kim's eyes caught the sight of another girl standing underneath. She was facing straight the school building, but her eyes alone were looking up, glaring at Kim. They were so intense, Kim stepped away from the window despite of herself. Somehow she thought of the Punshinsaba game 2 nights ago and felt regret. But there wasn't much she could do or change now. Another week passed. A terrible news struck the school. A second-year student was found dead. She was found hung by the founder's family tomb. "What could be the reason?" Kim said. "Who can tell? Most likely falling grade," her mate said. "Do you know the name?" "I think it was Im Young-hee or something like that." Kim was frozen with a shock. Could that Im Young-hee be the spirit they contacted during Punshinsaba? During the lunch break, Kim ran to the mountain behind the school. There was a hole made on the fence. The dead girl must have sneaked in through there. Next to the founder's tomb was a big tree, and there she must have hung herself. Kim dropped in front of it and prayed and begged. "Forgive me! Forgive us! We had no idea! We had no idea you were contemplating death so seriously! We were just playing a silly game! Forgive us! Forgive!" Maybe her earnest plea was accepted. Kim never saw anything weird around her again. But she would not toy with any kind of occult or necromancy even as a light-hearted fun to this day. I'm in the last year of vocational school. As usually is the case, I found an apprenticeship at a middle-sized company. It was a big deal for me. It might not only pave the first stone towards my future career, but also, provided I managed to keep my position for 4 years, it would also substitute the mandatory military service. All great. Except a mate from the same school got a post there too. I'll call him Kim for the sake of the story. I already disliked Kim from the school. He had a wild imagination and would talk of his fantasies as if they were facts. On contrast, I'm more of a type that sticks to proven fact. Basically, we were on natural clashing course, and we already had history of hot arguments and fights. But as I said, the apprenticeship is a big deal for me, and I didn't want the clash become an issue at work. I really tried to oppress my frustration whenever Kim went on with the BS as usual, and calmly explained to him what the actual facts were. My friends teased me that I grew the patience of a saint. But looking back, I should rather have just ignored Kim entirely. I won't explain what happened exactly, but Kim's blubbing snowballed into a serious problem at work. So serious that our school teachers came to visit the company, and even the education ministry got involved. My anger and frustration about Kim knew no bound at that point. I found a quiet corner in the storage and made sure there was no one around, and vented out. "Ah! Effing Kim, you son of a bitch! Just die out of my life!" When I turned around to go back to my position, there he was, none other than Kim, staring at me. It totally caught me off guard that I yelled out the F word despite of myself. Caught red-handed, I didn't know what to say or act. Did he hear what I said? He must have. He must. Kim just stared at me without a word. The silence in that moment was so heavy that it almost felt suffocating. Kim then just turned around and walked out of the storage. I called out his name, but he didn't even bother to stop. Brief intention to apologize was quickly overtaken by fresh anger. He was the one that caused all the trouble, and why should I apologize? I yelled, "Suit yourself, you piece of shite!" Kim stopped. Curse my temper. Love him or hate him, Kim was bound to be my colleague for the next 4 years. I mumbled something again in attempt to apologize, and Kim slowly turned around to look at me. But no, it was just his head that was turning. I heard his neck bone break ringing in the quiet hallway, face perfectly expressionless all the while, and it still didn't stop. The head kept turning. Skin around the neck stretched and wrung until it eventually ripped with bursting blood. It still didn't stop, and the head fell off from the body and rolled all the way till it hit my feet. Kim's face was now smiling wide, showing all his teeth. Okay, I did see some ghosts when I was little and had to seek help from a shaman and so on. But this was nothing like the shadow figures I saw then. Kim's crazy smile, the skin about his neck ripped and mangled like a burst overripened tomato. They were so real, just like real. Every cell in my body screamed to get out, but my body didn't respond until I heard a footstep approaching. It finally shook me out of the frozen state, and I screamed. I never knew I could be so loud. It's not even a big company, but I was later told that everybody in the office on the second floor heard me too. Before I realized it, everybody was surrounding me with surprised faces. I found myself collapsed on the floor, and Kim's head was nowhere to be seen. My direct boss asked me what was wrong, and that was the first time I saw normally dismissive him so worried. My ripping scream must have wrecked my vocal cords, that I coughed out some blood, and the manager of the company took me to a hospital. Later I heard Kim was working in his post all the while this was going on. It was a particularly busy day at his department apparently, and he never left the post. My doctor, a psychologist, didn't believe what I recounted, of course. His focus was if I didn't take any substance or something, which, for hell, I have never ever. On my boss's recommendation, I took a week-long sick leave. And when I came back to work 7 days later, I heard Kim died. 2 days prior, the manager was the first one to arrive at the company. Before he sat down at his desk, he heard a loud thud. When he got out to check, He found Kim down at the bottom of staircase hall, his head crushed on the marble floor. When the police later checked on the record of the surveillance camera, it showed Kim walk up the stairs, then stopped to look down, and throw himself down. It was a shock to everybody. Kim's parents believed it must be because Kim was bullied and made a big show at the company, and our normally butchy boss was so shaken that he had to seek therapy. And just now, I finished my shift and was resting, and I got a call from the manager. He asked me if I hung around on the ground floor earlier during my shift. Well, I didn't. My position is on the second floor, and I had no business on the ground floor until the lunch time. And then the manager explained.
You see, I was smoking by the parking lot outside, and I saw you staring at me from the window of the packing office on the ground floor. It was definitely you. You just gave me a look and quietly turned away. I mean, it's just considering what happened recently. I wanted to make sure if everything is all right,
he said. Now I'm shaken. I'm scared if I would not turn out like Kim for whatever reason. On the day I saw Kim's head breaking off, what made me scream out loud was not the sight of his head. It was to whom the approaching footstep belonged. It wasn't my boss, the manager, the line leader, or Miss Lee. It was me. I saw me walking backwards with my head turned back to stare back at me. That was why I screamed desperately. I'm scared now. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. I actually realized the similarity of Wraith and Doppelganger as I read today's stories. At least in more traditional explanations, if one runs into one's own doppelganger, it means one is about to face death. Probably the idea of Wraith and Doppelganger is closely related. By the way, I have already made a few episodes about Doppelganger. If you missed them, the link's in the description. Have you heard of Wraith before? Do you know any story or example of Wraith? Do let me know in the comment. If you enjoyed my work, please leave it a like and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. If you'd support me more directly, I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account, or there's Super Thanks option on YouTube for a small donation. In whichever form, your support means really a lot for my tiny channel. Thank you. Until next, stay safe, and do hold tight your spirit down.